How's it going, ParaTruthers? For today's episode, we decided to bring another archive out of the closet, dust it off, and bring it to you, where we did an episode with Stephen Lancaster called Oh Norman, about Norman the Doll, when we were ParaTruth Radio. We hope you enjoy it. Stephen, welcome to ParaTruth Radio. How you doing tonight?
I am fantastic. It's North Carolina. It's like 30 degrees. Tomorrow it'll be 90. It's a North Carolina's paranormal in itself. That's why I live here.
Well, that whole East Coast is one of the oldest parts of the country, so yeah, I would believe it. Before we get like in depth with your story, tell us a little bit about how you came into owning Norman and kind of what made you want to write about it.
Oh God, you just jumped right to the big gun. There was no weaning into that. Norman, I'm a collector. What you guys can see on this video feed is the haunted section of my studio. A lot of these things are items that clients had given me because they believed that was the source of the activity. So the stuff came here. But what you don't see are the museum cases of vintage Star Wars and Batman and all this other stuff. So I'm always looking for particularly antique toys. And my wife and I, just about every other weekend, we do about a 3-hour circle of all these vintage shops and thrift stores. And anyways, long story short, we came across this one store, really huge. It was like an airplane hangar. Okay. That was an antique shop. That's how big it was. Kind of like being in a Walmart. And I look up and I see this really interesting wooden box. It was sitting in a high chair, but it was well without reach. Like customers were not to be messing with this thing. But the building was so big, just had a couple elderly ladies working the front. She couldn't see me. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to pull this box down because I want the box. Pull the box down and the lock is broken off of it. So I'll pull out a little penknife and pop it open. And there is this 1962 Maddie Mattel doll. And the box itself was unique. There was handwriting all on the inside of the box, but in different handwriting. Like it wasn't the same person that had written it. So the box was kind of its own story. So all I saw at that moment was 1962 vintage Maddie Mattel doll. You know, this is the same doll, the face that later, became Casper and Chatty Cathy. It was all the same face. They just kind of changed the doll's look. And took it up to the front, and the woman was kind of reserved at first to sell it. Like she was almost surprised I even had it in my hand. And after a few minutes of awkwardness, she came across, or she said one of the coolest lines I've ever heard anybody say, because I said the thing looks like hell. Why would you want to keep this thing? And she said anything that looks like hell was bound to come from it. And I was like, okay, you've got my attention here. Let me introduce myself. So I tell her, I'm an author, paranormal researcher, all this stuff. And just to kind of cut it down, I offered $5 for this doll, and she sold it to me. So we get it home, and I named it Norman just because he didn't look normal to me. And that kind of later had a double meaning, because once I learned that he was haunted, that there was an attachment to him, he was nor man nor toy. He was Norman. So it kind of just worked out name wise, but he's really a Maddie Mattel doll. And things would periodically happen in the house anyway, just because we're very active investigators. And I believe in spiritual magnetism. The longer you're at a location, you can kind of bring that home with you, that kind of thing. Plus, a lot of these allegedly haunted items, it's nothing to have something happen, nothing epic, just little subtle things, knocking, whispering. Well, these things started to escalate, and it just more and more started to point towards this doll. And I have the luxury of sitting at home because I write. I have manuscript deadlines and all that. So I could literally dedicate 24/7 to researching this doll. And that's exactly what I did. And I just kept track of everything. I'm so meticulous about documenting stuff. And I was on a 3-book deal already with Llewellyn Worldwide, and Norman changed all that. When I signed to Llewellyn in 2009, the deal was my books were going to chronicle my investigations, where each chapter was a different case, a different place, you know, one in, one out, you're going to the next story. Well, I finished my 3rd book, which only had Norman as a chapter, and basically the first few accounts with him. And immediately my acquisitions editor hits me back and says, "Can you make Norman an entire book?" And I was like, well, as a researcher, you've got to give me more time. Like, I need at least a solid year with this thing before I can write an entire book about it, if it even produces that kind of material. And they agreed to it. They wanted the story of Norman so bad. And it went actually about a year and a half. And I got them the first Norman manuscript, and then kept researching him for now 5 years now, I guess. And that one did so well. And I, of course, kept researching the doll. I had another book, you know, more. Here's bringing everybody up to date. Here's Norman too. This is where it's at now, you know. So
let's step back a little further, because you have all this haunted stuff. You write these paranormal books. You have Norman. What got you into the paranormal originally? What was your experience that you're like, all right, I'm dedicating the rest of my life to this?
This is such a cool story. You're Erik, right? Okay, Erik,
Yeah.
this is such a cool story because I grew up in a very strict military Baptist home. I went to Calvary Christian Academy during school. You did not talk about this kind of stuff. And when I was 10 years old, I slept in bunk beds with my brother. And there was a 5-year difference between the two of us. So I was older. I got the top bunk. That was just how it was going to be, you know? So my brother and I were kind of pranksters. And in the middle of the night, I kind of felt something tugging on my ankles, like, you know, the blanket below, you know, towards the foot of the bed. And I wake up and I just think it's my brother. And I lean over the rail and I look over and he appears to be fast asleep. So I'm thinking, yeah, okay, whatever. So I doze back off. The same thing happens again, but this time it's a little harder, a little more force to it. I immediately jump up, look over the bed. He's fast asleep. I'm thinking, okay, there's no way he's moving that fast. And this happens a few more times, probably over the course of an hour. And then it gets to the point where there's no denying. It was like something grabbed my ankle and I slid on the bed a little bit, maybe 4 to 6 inches. So I sat up. And the moment I sat up, something grabbed me by both wrists that I couldn't see, to the point where I could see the indentations, like, you know, when you press on your skin. And I was powerless, completely powerless. I was trying to scream. I was trying to pull back. I couldn't do anything, completely drained. So this went on for what felt like forever, but finally it let go. And I was pulling so hard that I flew back and my head hit that hard. It broke it.
Oh.
And at that moment, that's when I was able to scream. And I'm, of course, at 10 years old, yelling for my mom and dad. They come running into the room. They dismiss it as a nightmare. That's what it was. It was a nightmare. Well, from that point forward, for the next 10 years, let's say, yeah, it was 10 years. All I did was read. I could find on parapsychology, cryptozoology, ufology, whatever. But I had to sneak this stuff into the house because this material was taboo. Okay, not only in my household, but just where I grew up. Back then, people didn't talk about the paranormal like are today.
Right.
Today, everybody wants to tell their story. But back then, you just didn't talk about that stuff. So I researched it until about 97. And basically, I think I was 19. And I remember my neighbor coming to me. He's like, "Hey, dude, you're into all this paranormal stuff. Look." He's like, "I've got something going on, but don't tell anybody." Can you come check it out? Don't tell anybody. Again, even in 97, people didn't want it out there that a Ghostbuster, as we tend to get called, is doing this stuff. So I started taking cases for people around my hometown. And then eventually I moved to New York for a little bit, took cases there. Then I moved south to the Myrtle area. I ran that circuit for probably 10 years, taking cases, eventually forming a team, eventually doing my first book in 2009. But the interesting point to that story is after I released my first book, my family came down to Myrtle Beach for Thanksgiving. And we're all sitting around the table, and mom and dad, they're talking about how proud they are, which is a total 180. It's like, wait a minute, you're proud of me. My mother, it's giving me chills every time. She said, Stephen, what happened to you at 10 years old? The same exact thing happened to me.
Oh.
And it took 20 years for her to tell me that. And that just added a little more validity to it. I went into the field to find out why that happened to me and what was it. I wanted to know everything. And then 20 years later to find out from my own mother that the same thing happened to her. And then my dad started opening up. Oh, honey, you remember how haunted your aunt whoever's house was? I'm like, where was all this? Where was all, this, we weren't supposed to be talking about this stuff. Like, God forbid, bring in a Marilyn Manson album. It was that kind of upbringing. But now it's like every time I talk to him, what's going on? You been in any cool places now? What else have you seen? It's just amazing. But I guess when you think back to it, what would you tell a 10-year-old?
Right.
Well, that probably was a demon, but you just go back to sleep. So I can't hold it against them.
Yeah, I mean that's the same thing with my parents. I didn't have quite the same upbringing, but my sisters and I always experienced haunted stuff in our house, and right now actually. And my parents, my mom especially, who grew up in this house, said there's nothing here. It's all your mind, whatever. And then probably when I was about 16, 17 years old, my mom and my uncle, they were drinking, and we started talking about ghosts. And all of a sudden, both of them start talking about, oh, remember how haunted this house was when we were younger? And we're like, what? You said it's not. And they're like, oh, we're lying. It's really haunted. So, it was just crazy. Like, it's weird, and I'm sure it's a way for family members to protect the children because, as a 10-year-old, it's scary enough that you're dealing with whatever you're dealing with, but then to feed it, that would just be
right.
Dangerous.
Oh, absolutely.
So sorry, Justin, I'm going to cut in with one more question real quick.
Hey, y'all don't mind if I smoke in here, do you?
No. So regarding, because now you said that you had the experience as well, the same experience. Did you trace or try to trace back experiences, see how far it went back in your own family? Because there's this idea of obviously like spirits that run the bloodline and stay with that family for generations.
To an extent, my brother still to this day is not a believer.
Okay.
And he has witnessed things. There are things I wrote about in my first book that he was a part of, and he will still deny it to this day. Like I say, I come from a very religious upbringing. I have 4 uncles that are Baptist preachers. So they're not giving up anything. They in their mind, they're very, I'll just tell you, my one uncle, he thinks what I do is devil worshiping. Literally thinks that I'm like, that's what you really think I do. There's like memes that you see, like what my friends think I do,
Yeah,
what my uncle who's a Baptist preacher thinks I do, what I really do. I'm like, I'm a Satan worshiper, really? But that's just their frame of mind. So some of my family you can talk about that stuff with, some of that you can't. But no, there's not really anything that I have found as far as some kind of, I don't know what you want to call it,
right?
Magical tie to the supernatural. I don't know.
Right. Well, I mean, I honestly feel Erik and my family have paranormal ties that go back a long ways, but like Erik said, it was never talked about. I don't think Grandpa and Grandma Cancelleri ever talked about anything. And Grandpa came from the old country. He came from Sicily to here. And it's just one of those things in the old country you don't talk about, you just ward against it. Where here you don't talk about it, and you just, there's no such thing as the paranormal, at least back in the day. But moving back into the Norman and Norman 2, so you've had quite an experience with Norman, and in Norman 2, you talk about how this doll actually set fire to itself and your barn, I believe. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about that.
That oh geez, it's weird to relive this kind of thing, but
I'm sure.
I still to this day don't want to believe half of it. And if somebody else were telling me this stuff, I'd be like, yeah, whatever, man. You know, there's just no way. But fire seems to really be the trigger. And if you take into account his backstory, he was found with a little girl. She lost her mother. She lost her household pet. She lost a dog. The house was essentially burnt to the ground, and she was found outside by authorities at 6 or 7 years old. I got to watch what I say because some of this I had to change, but holding this doll, Maddie Mattel. And see, Maddie Mattel was actually given to her mother as a gift in the hospital. She was supposed to have twins, and she didn't. The boy was a stillborn, but the daughter lived. So Maddie Mattel was a gift, and of course, the girl kept the doll. And you guys want to talk about connecting things? My wife was supposed to have twins. The boy died, and the daughter lived.
Wow.
So that, whether or not that has anything to do with anything, it's an interesting coincidence, to say the least. But fire has always been some kind of trigger with Norman, and I think it has to do with that initial fire, and not so much with the first book, but it got really, really, really dangerous as I continued to monitor him. Depending on what you read on Norman or what you saw on TV, like most of the stuff on TV is only 25% of the entire story up to this point, or at least up to where I've stopped. And it confuses people because there are people who watch the shows and people who read the books, or people who read the books and don't watch. But the people who watch the shows are like, why is his face burnt? You know, well, you got to read, we haven't, I guess TV hasn't got to that part, but
Right.
They see it, and there's all this stuff on it. But anyways, we have surveillance throughout the house, inside and out, because of Norman. Because that was the best way to document the things that he was doing. And with having a lot of animals, it's good to use that to dismiss, hey, it was just the dog coming through the room, or, the cat did something. The cats are always doing something. But he has killed many animals, I believe. I've never physically seen it, but it's just too coincidental. The fire that he set to himself, if I wouldn't have been awake and looked at, because I don't know if you guys are familiar with surveillance, but when it switches over to infrared, the screen kind of goes bright for a second.
Right.
Well,
Right.
our screen's in my eye, and I look over into this room that we had put Norman in, and he's on fire. Well, the carpet under him is on fire. And if we wouldn't have been awake, this house would have burnt to the ground. So of course I run in there. I actually use him to beat the fire out. I mean, it sounds funny to say it now, but it was really scary at the time. And he gets burned, he's melted and all that stuff. And then, of course, we get this mysterious fire out back where we got the horse and stuff, and that burns to the ground. And we did a really cool experiment with Norman, because up until the point I'm about to tell you, everything done with him was here at the house. Well, when I went to Virginia to film a haunting for the first time, when they wanted to do the haunting on Norman, I assumed they wanted Norman. So I brought Norman with me. That wasn't the case. They said, no, do not bring that doll in this studio. We don't want anything to do with that doll. We are recreating the doll for the show. I mean, okay, well, somebody could have told me that,
Right.
but we had the doll. We had the doll there. And a colleague of mine, Darren Evans, he's real big into demonology, mostly the Ouija board stuff. And I said, hey, man, because he was one of the few people that I had shared all this research with, the videos and all this stuff. And I said, why don't we do kind of an impromptu investigation? This is the first time that Norman's been away from the house. Let's see what he can do kind of outside of that comfort zone. So my wife's there, Darren's there, and we filmed probably 4 to 5 hours. And it is, to this day, the best communication session I've ever documented. And I of course, whittled it down to about 30 minutes and threw it up on YouTube. So if anybody out there wants to watch it, you can go watch it. But it's one thing to get a response here or there and kind of make it go with what you were saying, find some reason that connects. But these were blatant responses. I mean, blatant responses, saying things there's no way. I mean, the doll don't even talk. It's not electronic in any way, so that's bizarre to begin with. But every time Darren would bring like the lighter close to him, he would say fire, or he would say hell, or he would say no, or he would say burn. I mean, or he dislikes me, so he would say dead or kill. It's a really interesting communication session to watch. And we did that the night before filming a haunting. And I remember going in to film my part for the show, and I'm telling the producer about it. I said, you got to see this video. I know you guys don't do the investigation show kind of thing. It's all recreation, but you got to see what we got last night. And they ended up taking like 10 minutes of that footage and actually weaving it into the episode because it's just that awesome.
Right.
So there's just a lot out there with him, and there's more that'll eventually be released. But fire is definitely a trigger, no doubt.
That's interesting. So have you found that like the more time you spend with him, the more talkative he's become? Like, is there like a comfort between you two now? Is it changed from when you first got him to years later?
No, there's no comfort.
Okay.
I think
I don't mean that in a relaxed setting, but
now typically, my colleagues would tell you I'm the run right at it guy. I mean, run right at it. When everyone's running the other way, I'm like, well why? This is why we're here.
Right.
It never made sense to me, but it probably wouldn't be as bad if it was just me. But when we're dealing with all of our animals, my wife, grandkids, stuff like that. I have 2 of my grandkids that aren't allowed in this house anymore because of Norman.
Wow.
If you've seen that surveillance footage of him sitting on the bed and he's like looking around, this doll whose neck doesn't do that. Yeah, his parents said, nah, no, they're not coming over no more. Y'all can come over here. So it's, I guess if it was just me, it would probably be different. But yeah. It seemed that he likes the attention. I'll admit that, the more attention you give him, but you got to be careful because this is a different, this is like, I believe in that spiritual magnetism and attachments and stuff like that. I have never come across an object that is not only haunted, but clairvoyant, if that makes sense. He has predicted things and then they happen. I mean, literally, like I mean, like for instance, during that communication session that we did in Virginia with him, he kept saying a particular person's name and death and kind of everything that goes along with it. The next day, we find out that Darren's radio co-host hanged himself in his closet at the same time we were investigating Norman. And that was the name that Norman kept saying. Wow. Stuff like that has led me to believe, okay, he's got some kind of connection. Now the second book gets into a little bit of how I've actually used him. I've used the paranormal to investigate the paranormal. I have taken him to locations that I have proven over time that is haunted and taken him in there as a communication tool. And it has worked every time.
Wow.
So the worry is I've seen him put kids in trances. He put my grandson in a trance. I've been locked into a trance with him. So, and this is, I wish you guys knew me for the past 20, because this is not like me. I don't buy into this stuff. Like if somebody else were telling this story, I would not believe it. So that is what has made me so intrigued with him is, okay, he can somehow predict things. He can manipulate everything around us. This is a plastic doll with no electrical parts, but gives off an electromagnetic field higher than a refrigerator that I can point a temperature gun at, and he will go from 74 degrees to 54 degrees in a few seconds. This is unheard of. This is an entity. And, you know, so many people have said, why would you keep that thing? Why wouldn't you get rid of it? And the same thing I say to my guys that run the other way is this is my job. When you have, I mean, this is a once in a lifetime find. So why would I get rid of it? This is like the holy grail of the paranormal to me. You know, I mean, and it's not the only thing I'm investigating, obviously, but as far as if I were to rank my past 20 some years, he's number one. Mm-hmm. Because I can't disprove anything. You know, most of the time you can disprove stuff or at least give a paranormal reason for it.
Right.
In my mind, this stillborn baby that was supposed to be born in 1967, the soul, if you want to call it that, I prefer to call it energy, went from that child into that doll. And a lot of people think, well, there's a child in that doll. I don't think so. I think there's probably at this point almost a 60-year-old man in that doll. And, you know, you have to kind of suspend belief or disbelief there for a minute, because it's like, how do we learn as human beings? Through observation, period. You learn how to do anything by observation. So if there's an entity in that doll that started out as an infant, mentally, he would be almost 60 years old simply by watching everything around him. To me, that makes perfect sense, especially when we've seen and captured an older man coming through our house, hearing a male's voice, not a child giggling, nothing like that. Everything related to Norman is like an older man.
Wow.
It's crazy.
It's really crazy.
Well, that was a question of mine is, can you track what entity is in it, or do you believe that it is a human spirit or something else altogether?
That's a good question. I don't want to say I don't subscribe to. I don't like the word demon, because demon always attaches religion to it. Okay,
right. That's why I say other entity, not necessarily demon. Right.
I believe that if you were a bad person in real life, if you want to say it that way, if you were a rapist, a murderer, or whatever, guess what you're going to be in the afterlife?
Right.
You're going to be an evil person. If you were a murderer, except you got attributes we don't have, you know, so you're even worse. But right. I think whatever it is beyond what I can even begin to explain, because we have seen that night I saw the old man come from what used to be my stepdaughter's room to the room that actually Norman was kept in. It was this old man. So that would give you the male human form. One of the most detailed things I've ever seen. Most of the time, it's like a shadowy figure, you know, with other investigations, you know, just solid black, something. This was detailed as an old man. But before that had even happened, during Hurricane Matthew, it was that solid black kind of self-illuminating eyes kind of look. So it's hard to say, you know, I guess I answer your question like this. People always say, "Hey, I've investigated this location and we're dealing with a little girl." Well, why do you think you're dealing with a little girl? Well, the EVPs sound like a little girl, or the EVPs are saying I'm on one hurricane. Another time I see an old man, we don't know what the limitations are. So we don't know what is actually, I just know there's a negative energy. That's what I can say for certain. Putting a name to it or anything like that, forget about it. I don't think that'll ever happen.
Okay. So do you find that when you've taken him on investigations, or even in your own home with some of these haunted objects you have, does he tend to get along with other spirits, or is he more aggressive?
That's the interesting part, is using the paranormal to investigate the paranormal. I thought about that. I thought, okay, I'm going to take him to some locations where the activity's benign. I'm not about to take him to a location where he can start a Justice League of evil entities. You know what I'm saying? So this was fantastic. And I got this on film. So I take him to this. It was a former Haitian slave refuge that this family had bought the property, and they converted it into a nonprofit. So it was, what do you want to call it? It's just an old looking barn that was like a thrift store, kind of. And they had activity at this location. Well, I investigated this location many times, and it turned out it was the client's father. Completely, nothing bad. So I thought, you know what? I'll take him there. I'll take him there first just to see if anything happens. Well, the clients wanted to check it out, and the client's brother really wanted to check it out. Yeah, his name was Chris. Now, I really hope he is listening to this. Okay. He is one of the biggest skeptics I have ever seen in my life. So I'm filming everything. They have a counter area in this building, where they cash people out or whatnot. And I got a camera set up. I've got one I'm holding, and Norman's just sitting on the counter. So Angie, the client, says, "Hey, do you want this?" And she goes to hand Norman a cross, and he says, "Angela, no." Just like that. What are the chances, right?
Right.
So Chris is still sitting there like, yeah, okay, right? He's like, okay, if you're really doing something, can you make the lights flicker? And the lights flicker on cue. Now, it's an old building. I can let that one go. This one is for the books, guys, okay? Chris grabs his cell phone. He starts scrolling through his cell phone, and he goes like this to Norman, up to Norman's face, maybe about 6 inches from Norman's face. And we're all standing around there like, what is Chris doing? We can't see what Chris has on the screen. And you can clearly see that in the video. Chris says, "Okay, Norman, if you are real," or however he worded it, "tell me who this is in this picture." And it was quiet for a second. And then Norman said, "Jacob." And Chris's face went white as a ghost, and he just kind of sat back and goes, "Damn." And we're like, what? He goes, "I just showed him a picture of my son, Jacob, who lives up north, with his mother." So what are the chances of Norman is completely self-aware of what's around him? And I think taking him to spiritually active locations, I think because there are objects in here already haunted, like this Dybbuk behind me, that he just pulls from all that, like anything energy-wise does. We do it,
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty incredible. I mean, no, I didn't even know Chris had a son. So yeah, that was pretty mind-blowing, to say the least.
So, something that I find super interesting about this is, I don't know if you know who Chris Moon is.
Not personally. I do know the name somehow.
Okay.
It sounds
He inherited one of the original Frank's boxes from Frank himself, and had started communicating with what he called his, I believe he calls them his tech team or whatever on the other side. So he would go around to events and bring his spirit guide would bring
other people's loved ones from the other side to talk through this Frank's box. A former friend of mine confirmed, yeah, that was my uncle's voice on there. So it kind of fascinates me that you've brought Norman along, because he has kind of become your Frank's box to a certain degree.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. It was just, it was never intended to be like an ongoing thing. And I don't take him on every investigation. It's maybe 1 out of 10. And these are locations that I've investigated for years. So I already know what's there or what's not. But it was more of an experiment. And that little session up in Virginia kind of sparked that, like, well, what could he do somewhere else? What could he do in a place that's haunted? Let's find out.
Right.
And we did. It's awesome.
So, I mean, you had this idea that the spirit, whatever's attached to Norman, is an evil entity, based on whatever evidence you've collected. So the question is, do you think that he was naturally, I don't know what better word to make it other than like born an evil entity, or if he was human, that was like a child that went into it and grew up? Why do you think he became evil over time? Is it because he's trapped, or?
My theory is, like any of us, okay, we all have things we like, we all have things we dislike. For instance, if there's rape in a movie, I won't watch the movie. I can't get into that. I don't like that kind of stuff. So with him, my theory is he's bitter because he never got to live the life that he thought he was going to live. He got to watch his sister do it. Okay, now she gave up the doll when she was in her 50s, and that's how it ended up at the antique shop.
Okay.
And she donated it to the shop, told the ladies, that she believed pretty much everything we just talked about. And the little girl who grew up, never had any luck with men, multiple divorces. From what I've gathered, because he's come at me, he's rarely kind of went violent towards my wife or any girl. Now he's tried to scare them, almost like a power trip kind of thing. But he's never harmed them. I mean, there's been shoving and stuff like that, but never like he's come at me, trying to burn me down to the ground. Right. I think he's got a thing against males. And if a male is in the picture, he wants them out so he can take their place. So it looks at my wife, and at the time, my stepdaughter who lived with us, as his situation all over. So they were surrogates. Hannah would have been his sister, and my wife would have been his mom. So get me out of the picture, and he's got what he never had. So that's all theory, just based on what I've seen, trying to make sense of it. I can't say that as fact, but it makes sense, knowing all the little details and coming at the males. It just makes sense to me. I don't think he was born evil. I just think it's a bitterness. Like, we all get upset about things and hold grudges. And, I got a friend I haven't talked to in 15 years because of something stupid 15 years ago. You know what I mean? Right. So I don't think he's going to bust out with any horns or anything. Of course, I don't know. We'll find out.
Now, after this conversation, the doll will grow horns. And well, another theory on kind of what you're talking about is, if he witnessed his sister go through these horrible relationships, he finds that men are negative and doesn't want women to go through that again. It doesn't matter if he witnesses a man being good or not.
That's an interesting perspective, because, honestly, I've never really considered that. I looked at her issues with relationships was because of him trying to get them out, but that's an interesting perspective, Justin. I never thought of that, maybe she was just naturally unlucky with men, and that put a bad taste in his mouth.
Right.
You know, it's interesting.
Well, we are coming close to the end of the show, so we wanted to give you a chance to tell everybody where they can find you, find your books. I read that you have a podcast as well, so the mic is all yours to give them all that info.
Okay, thank you. The podcast is a lot of fun. It's I've done podcasting for like 12, 13 years. I just kind of keep changing format. I've always done it by myself, and this time wanted a co-host. So I got a really good friend of mine, Rick Hale, who's also a paranormal researcher and also an author. He lives in Chicago. Always talking his Chicago talk, but got him because we're kind of like-minded, and we do a show called Shadow Initiative Paranormal Talk. It's actually started as Shadow Initiative Paranormal TV, where we did it as a video version on YouTube. And the first season's still there. It's still like that. And that was my doing because I wanted people to actually see what we were talking about. You know, when I was showing evidence, they could actually see it instead of just listening to two old guys talk about it. And it just got to be too much work, you know, putting together like a 2-hour video show. So we went to podcast. So author Stephen Lancaster is where you can find everything on me. I've got the site down right now because I'm doing a major upgrade. Books are on Amazon. If you got Travel Channel or Discovery Plus, you can search up all the episodes I've done. My ghost story, a haunting a couple times, documentary on Amazon Prime called Phantom, The Haunting of Brentwood Wine Bistro, which a haunting just did an episode on last Friday night. It was okay. It was another one of those. We're going to pick and choose out of 10 years worth of research what you did and whittle it down to 42 minutes.
Right.
So, read the books. That's all I got to say. But that's about it. You know, I'm a real accessible guy. I love talking the paranormal. So just find me on Facebook and we'll talk about it.
Awesome. All right, Stephen, thank you for being on ParaTruth Radio.
Thank you guys for having me. I haven't talked Norman in a long time. That surprised me.
Pretty cool to have somebody on who can give us firsthand experiences with a haunted object, such as especially a doll, because we've come across dolls over and over again in our research. And we've talked a little, as you said, like with Annabelle and stuff, we talked about it. But being able to get in depth as to what he's experiencing and how this particular entity or doll or whatever you want to call it has manifested itself over the years and possibly even changed itself in terms of emotion and power, I guess. It's pretty cool. It gets me thinking of various haunted objects that I would love to collect, but at the same time don't want to, add to the power that's already in this house. It's kind of goofy.
You don't want a collection like Steven has? Is that what you're telling me?
I mean, no, the thing is I do, but I already know what lives in this house and I don't want to have to empower it more by giving it more energy. So.
Or have this, like Steven was talking about, a evil Justice League in your house.
An evil Justice League, the anti-Justice League.
Or like maybe some type of conflict between the multiple entities where it causes so much turmoil in the house that you're just like, just burn this thing to the ground. I'm going. I'm leaving this place. Whatever.
Done.
Mom and Dad, sorry to fire in the house. The entities just got to me.
There's a fire upstairs and a flood in the basement. I'm done.
But Stephen, like, I truly enjoyed talking to him just because he's been in the business longer than we have as far as paranormal investigation, but podcasting for as long as we have. And he kind of has a collection with these things, and kind of like, I'm sure the person he was talking about, it's just interesting because you would think you wouldn't want these things around. Like, most people wouldn't want haunted things in their home. So he takes it upon himself to get rid of them for them.
Yeah, and I think, and that's probably something we should have asked about. I didn't even think about it, but now that you brought it up, I feel like when it comes to haunted objects or hauntings, even depending on the person, there's like a spiritual awareness that when that particular entity is gone, no matter how scary it was or whatever, there's kind of a longing for it. Like I can't tell you how often, and it's weird, but like the whole demonic thing that I went through years ago, there are times where I wish it was still happening. Like that's weird. That's really weird. But there's like this longing where it's like, man, I remember the things that I saw back then. I remember the nightmares that I had. There's like a feeling behind it that I almost enjoyed. And it's probably the reason why some of these people continue to collect haunted objects and store up these spiritually charged artifacts, because there is that kind of energy that they feel attached to, and vice versa. And that's the only thing I could really think of. I mean, other than, of course, just doing the research, but yeah, it's weird.
Do you think that's what it is for yourself? You wish it was happening still because you would like to document it more? Because you were not necessarily documenting the activity per se, but you would always write down your dreams and stuff like that.
Right, I did. Which I wish I didn't lose that. Like, right, it was that last 2009. Doggone it. Yeah, I think in part it's probably wanting to do the documentation, the research on it, which I didn't do back then. We weren't doing this really. We weren't doing any podcasting or anything yet. It was all very new. But like nowadays, yeah, I mean, that's something I would love to do. But it kind of goes beyond that, because the only thing I could think of is like, it's the same reason that people go to see scary movies. There is a certain adrenaline rush that you get when something's happening, and it's the same thing when I have the night paralysis that I have regularly. It's really scary at the time, especially when there's an entity involved in it. And then I wake up in the morning and I'm like, that was wild. Like it's hard to fathom and understand it, but I don't know. It's maybe I'm just sick. I don't know. Sick in the head or something. I don't know. But no, I mean, seriously, I think there's probably some sort of adrenaline rush that people get. People like myself, people like Stephen, who has all those haunted objects, and so many other people. We've talked to people who've have haunted objects in their house. I don't know. I guess it's one of those things you just can't really fully pinpoint,
Right.
There's just some people who have them and some who don't.
Just like you're bringing up haunted or scary movies, horror movies. Yeah. Same thing with using the Ouija board.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you and I have talked on air and off air about how the paranormal is a type of addiction. Like,
it is.
You and I can't get away from it as much as we've thought about it or even tried.
We've tried
to get away from it.
It doesn't work. It follows. There are some people I think who can get into the paranormal, and we've talked to people who've gotten into the paranormal and then they've walked away because it's for whatever reason. But then there's us who have walked away from it and it called us back, try to avoid it at all costs, and then something shows up in the living room that should not be there, or things move and it's like, this is interesting. Let's figure this out, and you dive right back in. Yeah, dude, I think it's just, there are certain individuals who are, I hate to say spiritually awakened, but they're spiritually, they're like a conductor, right? So like you and I are conductors, right? It kind of this paranormal activity gravitates towards us, and not just that, but then it's that insistent or consistent pounding on our heads and our minds that are like, hey, we need to look into this. We need to hear more. We need to read more. We need to document more. And so we continue to dive deeper and deeper and deeper. And here we are with this podcast that wasn't supposed to be here because we were walking away, and now it's 8 years later, or 14 years, was whatever, however long it's been, 8 years, right? For this one.
For ParaTruth, it's been since 2014. So yeah.
Okay.
8 years. Going on 8 years.
Yeah.
All right, folks. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of ParaTruth Reborn, where we revisit our episode with Stephen Lancaster talking about Norman the Doll. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, no matter where you're listening. Make sure you check out all the great shows on United Public Radio Network. And make sure you check us out live every Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern. Until next week, where you will find us at the same time, same channel. Talk to you guys then.